أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء وخاتم المرسلين سيدنا ونبينا بالقاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين واللعنة الدائمة الباقية لأعدائهم من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد, sisters and brothers in Iman, Assalamu alaikum. We have selected Suratul Mulk, Surah number 67 of the Quran, for our discussion during these evenings of the month of Ramadan. We have looked at ayat number 1, 2, and the second one, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins by saying, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, تبارك الذي بيده الملك وهو على كل شيء قدير الذي خلق الموت والحياة ليبلؤكم أيكم أحسن عملا وهو العزيز الغفور. Basically, the translation is there that blessed is he who has absolute control on the kingdom and he has power over everything. He created death and life so that he may test you to see who among you is best in conduct, and he is the mighty, the forgiving. Just to summarize, to continue with the next ayat, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about his power and glory first, and then he began by talking about the purpose of life of the human being. That's where the creation of death and life comes in. And what is the purpose? The purpose, لِيَبْلُؤُكُمْ, to test you. Now, just one remark about it, that when Allah talks about ibtila, imtihan, and testing us, it's not because He needs to know. But it is an issue of fairness. And not only that, actually, it is the whole purpose of test, as I said yesterday, was to bring out the potential which is within us, the goodness which is within us, so that we may be worthy of salvation, sa'adat abadi, in the hereafter. And that's where test and trial is very important. Otherwise, a person's worth would not come out unless he is put under pressure and under test and trial. And what is that potential? It's interesting, just one word. لِيَبْلُؤُكُمْ, to test you. What is the potential that Allah would like to see manifest within us? أحسن عملا. Amal. Because when we look at deen, it's, sometimes people say, just to have good beliefs, dil mein mante hain sab, it's okay. What you do, it doesn't matter. The opposite of that is only do good deeds. Whether you believe or not, doesn't matter. Well, Islam doesn't go with the first or the second, it goes with the middle path, where you have to have proper sound belief system, aqidah, and that aqidah should reflect in amal. You can't say you believe in Allah and Rasul and the Imam and then don't follow what they are saying. And that is where the issue of amal with husn amal, ahsanu amal, means the action which is based on sincerity. And sincerity is based on the aqidah that a Muslim has towards Allah and Rasul and the Quran and the Imam of the time. Salawat alayhi wa sallam. The reason why we have alladhi there in red is just to connect to the next ayat, because the next ayat is flowing. After talking about his, mulk, his control on the mulk, then he mentioned creation of the death and life for human beings. And then the next ayat, he talks about الذي خلق سبع سماوات طباقا ما ترى في خلق الرحمن من تفاوت فارجع البصر هل ترى من فطور. He created, and then he goes on to talk about the creation of the heavens. He created 7 heavens in layers. طباقا means one over the other. ما ترى من خلق الرحمن من تفاوت. You do not see any discordance in the creation of the beneficent God. فارجع البصر هل ترى من فطور. Look again. Look at the sky. Do you see any flaw there in the system? Let us look at this ayat and the following ayat also. There are a few words we have to understand clearly. الَّذِي خَلَقَ سَبْعَ سَمَاوَاتٍ طِبَاقًا. He is the one who created 7 heavens in layers. What does sab'a samawat mean? Basically, this term, sab'a samawat, has occurred 7 times very clearly in Quran. 2 other ayats also refer to that in an indirect way. So in 9 places, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has described the concept of 7 heavens. The idea existed even in previous scriptures. It's not only Quran which talks about it. This is there even before Islam. And during the time of the Abbasid, when the Muslims became familiar with the science and philosophy of Greek and the Roman times, basically when it was translated into Arabic, this is where they came to know about astronomy and that there are 9 planets. And that became an issue of debate among the Muslim scholars. How do you reconcile sab'a samawat, 7 heavens on one side, what Quran is saying, with the 9 planets of the solar system that we have? And, it's not only the Mufassirin, by looking at different disciplines in the Islamic sciences, scientists as well as scholars of religion and theologians and philosophers, there are actually 19 different opinions on this issue. And I don't want to, waste our time on going through it. But people like Abu al-Sina, for example, he says, sab'a samawat refers to the 7 planets, and the 8th and 9th, he says, that's actually arsh and malaika. This is the arbitrary, tafsir that he has done. Khaja Nasruddin Tusi, who came later on, a philosopher, a theologian, and a scientist in his own right in the 7th century of the Muslim era, he also he tried to modify the science and bring 9 to 7 there in order to reconcile Quran with the scientific view. Allama Majlisi again, says yes, sab'a samawat, 7 planets, and then 2, he says, modifies Ibn Sina's view, where he says it's arsh and not malaika, but arsh and kursi. So that would be 9. Now these are all different, Hadi Sabzawari, another philosopher who came later on, they have other different views. But it is not really, all these explanations given are not sustainable. We go with the common understanding, which you also see as a preferred choice of Ayatollah Nasir al-Makarim Shirazi in his popular Tafsir Namuna, as well as Allama Tabatabai. They actually have 2 different views on that. But and we don't know, it's either one or the other. Allah knows better. The authors of Tafsir Namuna basically say that we'll have to go with the words sab'a samawat tibaqan, one over the other. What we see is the lowest one. There are 6 heavens and skies above it, with their own systems. And we don't know, and science is still in a very, very shallow area of the ocean of knowledge. They don't know much about, what is out there. Every day, with more powerful telescopes that they have, they are discovering new planets and new, bodies, celestial bodies in the space. Allama Tabatabai, looking at the literal meaning of the word samawat, basically goes to the symbolic interpretation. It says sab'a samawat doesn't necessarily mean physical space, 7 of them, or rather spiritual stations reaching to the arsh of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Salawat alayhi. And so the basis of that explanation is that you look at the word sama. It is from sumuv in Arabic, the root. And sumuv means, high. Even when we want to describe somebody's status in society, we say, he is a holder of sumuv. He is of a high, status in in the society. Even in Urdu, sometimes we say, oh, asman ko chhu rahe hain. Doesn't mean he physically is touching the sky. It means he is very up there. And so this meaning of sumu, and that's where you see people like Allama Tabatabai would take that literal meaning of the word sumu and say it refers to the spiritual status and stations from where the management of the universe is controlled, and that is where the wahy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes from. And so Arsh and Kursi and everything would be under that sab'a samawat. Now Quran has used this word samawat and sumuv in both physical sense as well as symbolic sense. And that's where, I don't want to go into details. We don't have that much time today. Let's go to the term 7. In Arabic language, there are certain numbers used not necessarily as numerical. 7. 7 is sometimes used, or 80, for example, thamanin is used just to express plentifulness of something, abundance of something. And so this is where, one of the views is that here sab'a samawat should not be taken in the literal sense of number 7. Rather, you take it as, many. So it's not only 7, it could be 14, it could be 21, it could be 28. It can be many samawat. We don't know about it. And so when we look at different tafasir, the conclusion would be the question that, what does 7 heavens then mean? We have two acceptable interpretation. One would be that it refers to the 7 heavens, just like our own solar system. So what you see, the sky is the lowest one. And then they are, above it. Now when we say above, it's relative to where we are now. Other part of the earth for them, above is what is below for us now. So it depends. It means beyond our own circle, they are samawat, which are 7 in number. Other is that, no, it refers to 7 spiritual stations, as Allama Tabatabai, for example, prefers. That they are, these are the places or the elevations on a spiritual level. And maybe one indication of that would be when we talk about 7 takbir we do before in namaz. And this is a tradition which is established because of the sunnah of that young grandson of Rasulullah, Hussein bin Ali alayhi salatu wassalam. It's because of that tradition of Hussein bin Ali, it is recommended to say 6 takbir, and the 7th one is then considered as takbiratul ihram, where you begin the namaz. And the question comes up, why? Although Hussein initiated that as a child, but if you look at the explanation is that there are 7 wails from here to the arsh of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sab'a samawat or sab'a hijabat, whatever you would like to term. With every takbir done with sincerity, your namaz is actually penetrating different wails and hijabat until by the 7th you reach to the arsh of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even the barakat of doing sajda on the turbat of Imam Hussain alayhi salam is the same. When you put the forehead on that turbat of Imam Hussain alayhi salam, your sajda actually, penetrates the 7 wails and hijabat and reaches to the arsh of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there is this concept of looking at, 7 spiritual levels or stations in the universe. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that look at the heavens. مَا تَرَى فِي خَلْقِ الرَّحْمَنِ مِنْ تَفَاوُتٍ. You do not see any discordance, disagreement, mismatching in the creation of the beneficent God. And this is where we see that this ayat is actually challenging us. That as Muslims, followers of the Quran, it is your duty to look at the sky. Now, what does it mean? Just looking at it? It means to study on it in order to understand the glory and the power and the majesty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is basically, put in a very, very interesting way that ma tara, that if you look at the heavens, the lowest one that you have, and you study this space, and this is where we see that, Islam is actually inviting us to go and study astronomy. Not astrology, be careful of that. We are talking about astronomy, to study the science of space and the bodies which are there. Why? Because we consider these to be ayat and the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The more you look at it, the more you find that this is the product of a God who is alim and hakim, all-knowing as well as wise. And not only that, the way it is emphasized here, see, look at the words. This sentence could have very easily been written by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that ma tara fi khalqillah min tafawut. That sentence could have come that way. That you would not see any discordance in the creation of Allah. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't choose His proper name. Rather, He relates His creation to one of His attributes, Khalq ar-Rahman. Why? This is to explain that even this creation that I have brought about, this khalq of samawat and maut and hayat and human beings and everything, this is actually a reflection of my mercy and rahmat. And that is why the whole universe is being presented by Him as Khalq ar-Rahman. And the ayat then goes on to emphasize the point. فَارْجَعِ الْبَصَرِ هَلْ تَرَى مِنْ فُطُورٍ. Look again, not only once. Look at the heavens that you can see, or by your scientific tools that you have created for yourself. Study this space and see again. Do you see any futur? Futur means any missing areas, missing parts, mismatching there, any flaw in the system. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says no. The futur and iftar. Iftar means we were fasting all the way and all of a sudden we cut it off. And that's where iftar comes in. And so this is what Allah is saying, look at the system. Is there any futur there? Anything, abrupt change without understanding, without wisdom? No. You will see everything is in its proper place, done in the best manner possible. And then not only, looking at once or twice, the next ayat, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, ثُمَّ ارْجِعِ الْبَصَرَ كَرَّتَيْنِ. Look again, كَرَّتَيْنِ, twice. You will see, يَنْقَلِبُ. When you look there and try to look for futur there or tafawut in the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you will not find anything. You will look again and again and you will be tired. Your eyes will come back. Will return back to this world, feeling humbled, defeated, and weary and tired. Because you will not be able to find any defect in the Khalq ar-Rahman, the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is where we see that, Islam as a religion is not against science. We do not have any conflict, and I said this even before, even when we had the tafsir in the year 2011 of Surah Jasiyah, we talked about it in detail, that unlike other religions, we do not consider that there is a tension between science and religion. Because we look at science as a tool to understand the power and glory of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We look at science as a window into the ayat of Allah, into the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And therefore you will see the Quran talks about this issue of discovering and studying the nature, the heavens and the earth, and even the tradition of the Muslims. The way they took the civilization and science of the past eras and civilizations, they put it together and basically made it even better. And that was finally taken to Spain during the Muslim era. And it is from the Muslim Spain that you see that science was promoted and introduced in Europe again. So when they talk about dark ages, it is dark ages in Europe only, not in the rest of the world. You know, sometimes even studying history becomes a problem. Look at the world map. If you go to all these maps we have in the Asian and Middle Eastern countries, produced mostly from the British, you will see Europe is there in the middle. The rest, even if they had to cut part of North America and this corner and that corner. Then you have the maps produced here in North America. You will see where we are there, right in the middle. So it's all subjective. You know, and so when they talk about history and they say, you know, human society went through dark ages, it is important to ask them which dark ages and for where. Because when Europe was in dark ages, there was enlightenment and nur and knowledge and science and technology in the Muslim East. And so this is where we see the relationship between Islam and science. Unfortunately, Muslims became arrogant, and with that comes stagnation, and with that came the downfall. So basically we have lost out not because of our religion, but because of not following the teachings of our religion. And so let me end with a very beautiful way that Sayyid Murtaza Mutahiri compares the role of religion and science, where he says, science gives us enlightenment, faith gives us hope. Science makes instruments, faith constructs purpose. Otherwise you will have instruments which will be just used for destroying human life all around the world. Science gives speed, but faith gives you the direction, how to use, in which direction you go. Science is power, but faith is benevolence. Science explains events, whereas faith inspires actions. Science is the outer revolution, and faith is the inner revolution. And this is where we see that as far as Islam is concerned, there is no issue of conflict between the faith and science. Yes, there are issues that we might not be able to understand, but as Quran says, look again and again and again. Study the nature again and again until a time will come you will realize the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept our a'mal, increase our tawfiqat, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep the Muslims wherever they are, especially the Shias of Amir al-Mu'mineen in Iraq at the moment, going through very difficult challenges. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep them under His protection. And those who are known as the takfiri, the terrorists, if they are capable of being guidance, may Allah guide them. And if not, may Allah make their hands and their sources null and void so that they do not inflict any further harm on the Muslims and the Shias of Ali. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.